Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair and to the first video of 2018. Before we start, I feel like I should address a few changes that we've made to the show. Yes, I trimmed my beard. Oh, and yeah, I'm wearing a different shirt. Long story short, the professor and I tried recalibrating the transporter and, well, the shirt never came back. Incidentally, if anyone happens to watch this video in another universe and comes across it, please return it to these dimensional coordinates. Anyway, it's become a tradition on this show to spend the first video of the year with something from one of my favorite franchises. The first 2 years were Star Trek related, the next 2 were MASH and Alan Alda related, and last year's was Doctor Who related when we looked at a Big Finish audio drama that featured my favorite non-canonical Doctor, as played by David Warner. As such, we're going back to the Unbound universe this year, but not with another audio drama. Mainly because I haven't figured out how to adapt audio material to the new format yet, but thankfully, as if answering my prayers, Big Finish had me covered. See, they're known for audio dramas and audiobook material, but sometimes they take a foray into print media, specifically with reprinting and releasing new material to the Bernice Summerfield series. See, I might be a little rambly, but I get there in the end. You might remember me telling you that David Warner's Doctor had recently crossed over with Bernice Summerfield over in her box set series. Along with the release of the second box set featuring their team-up, which is brilliant by the way, go check it out, they released a print collection of short stories featuring Benny's adventures in the Unbound universe during the gap between the two box sets. Bernice Summerfield, True Stories, doesn't feature David Warner's Doctor, since he's busy, off being president of the universe. Not really a role that suits the Doctor, any of them, though he makes it work, but it's still an enjoyable series of stories, tied together with a common theme. Some of them are true, but some of them are false, and Benny's not telling which. However, today we'll only be talking about 2 of the stories in the book. Why? Well, for one thing, doing an anthology is hard because with 6 distinct stories, plus a prologue and an epilogue, it doesn't really fit into this show's format, and the episode would be crazy long if I talked about every story. And 2 of the stories have a running plot thread, so I think they work better as a unit. Plus, if there's one thing that I've learned in the last 150 episodes since I started this show, it's don't burn all of your material in one go, because you might want to talk about that series or franchise again once you have better production values and writing talent. Oh yeah, if you thought that this is as good as the show's gonna get, you just wait for the 251st episode. Anyway, the framing narrative of the anthology is that Bernice Summerfield, future archaeologist/alcoholic, is being put on trial. Pretty standard for her at this point, I'd say. The only thing is that she's being put on trial by a computer, which demands to calibrate the lie detector that she tell 3 truths and 3 falsehoods, which she complies with, starting the anthology. All of the authors involved are writers who had contributed in some form to Doctor Who or Big Finish before. The first story, Hue and Cry, was written by Kate Orman and Q, Kate Orman being a former writer for the Virgin New Adventures and BBC books. And Q, not being an omnipotent being bent on putting humanity on trial, and instead being a contributor to the Faction Paradox series. The second story, Never the Way, was written by Jonathan Bloom, another former Bernice Summerfield and BBC books writer and Kate Orman's husband, and Rupert Booth, a writer and sometimes voice actor for Big Finish. So these people know a lot about Bernice Summerfield. They've all worked with her before. But do these stories do both Benny and the Unbound universe justice? Let's find out. This is Bernice Summerfield True Stories. cover is, despite it being a photo cover, really, really good. See, unlike a lot of other photo covers, it's dynamic. And because Bernice Summerfield is so intrinsically linked with Lisa Bowerman, this makes sense. It's space, though colored purple, which personally I really, really like. Inside a glowing ball in the middle is Professor Bernice Summerfield herself, staring intently at the reader. And can I just say, Lisa Bowerman's glare can give Peter Capaldi's a run for its money. At the top, we have the Bernice Summerfield logo, sneakily looking like the 7th Doctor era Doctor Who logo, with the top word slightly slanted in a different font than the bottom word, and the title True Stories underneath it, with a smaller set of text telling us it's an anthology of stories. At the bottom, we have the name of the editor, Xana Eve Chown, who is known for doing a lot of work for Short Trips and Bernice Summerfield at Big Finish. And speaking of Big Finish, their logo's at the bottom with their slogan, "We love stories." And really, they do. Big Finish are super dedicated. Overall, an utterly brilliant cover. It perfectly fits what's inside the book. Let's get to the story. So, due to the nature of these being 2 stories, I'm going to do things a little differently today. Instead of just doing a little bit of explanation of the initial part of the story and then the resolution, I'm just going to do the plot synopsis for both stories and then do all the other categories as per usual. But just before we start, in the event that you're not caught up on Benny's adventures, following the first 2 box sets where she had some adventures with the 7th Doctor and Ace, and the first one is just a really brilliant example of Big Finish material, and I highly recommend it, she was visited by another Doctor that Benny didn't recognize, David Warner's incarnation from Doctor Who Unbound. While attempting to anchor himself in the Prime Doctor Who timeline, he instead trapped the both of them in his universe, which is currently dying, so par for the course for the Doctor, especially considering that David Warner is closer to a classic Doctor than a modern one. Over the course of their first adventure, Benny learns that the Doctor is the president of the universe, and after defeating the nefarious manager, played by the incomparable Sam Kisgart, who recurred from his role in Sympathy for the Devil, the Doctor and Benny resolve to help lead this new universe and try to save it from destruction, so for the both of them, same old, same old. While the Doctor is otherwise indisposed, with clerical stuff and meetings and paperwork, Benny is off having adventures because, well, that's just what she does. Hue and Cry starts out with Benny in her natural element, an archaeological dig excavating a sky pyramid, waking up with a hangover. At the dig, one of the members of the team is Gilly.
Sorry.
Not that one. This Gilly is a Kyoshin, which is sort of like a lizard person, though not humanoid like a Silurian. She's actually a lizard and uses a voice box to translate, though she still doesn't have the greatest grasp on English, so a lot of the other archaeologists make fun of her behind her back, something that doesn't sit well with Bernice. There are a lot of protests going on regarding the dig because it simultaneously confirms previous religious views and contradicts them, meaning that the dig is crawling with soldiers, guarding what they can and can't do, which the archaeologists really don't like. In the pyramid are strange statues, and everything around is decorated with markings that seem to indicate that the statues are part of some mechanical or electronic system, though they don't know how to jumpstart it. I think they just need to get a couple of power moons and it'll start working right away. Bernice attempts to do so with copper wire that she and a colleague smuggled into the site, but while doing it, she's interrupted by Gilly, who disappears periodically during the dig. She tells Benny that she has something to tell her and takes her through a secret passage to an art studio. You know, I always knew Andy Warhol was an alien, just never pegged that he was from the source of the greatest evil in the universe, ancient Egypt. Wait a minute. I am not starting the year off by ripping off another reviewer. Actually, the studio is Gilly's, but that's not what she wanted to show Benny. What she wanted to show Benny was an electronic diary. Benny's electronic diary. But this one appears to be centuries old, and Benny's diary is tucked away back in her tent. Though this really can't come as a surprise to her, traveling with the Doctor. You walk into bootstrap paradoxes all the time. Though the question is, who composed Beethoven's Fifth? Benny can't muse on this development all that long, though, since it turns out that both groups of protesters have permits, and things are getting heated. Benny still wants to activate the statue, so she rallies everyone, including Gilly, and they get to work, attempting to get the statues up and running before all hell breaks loose. Benny asks Gilly about the diary, but she tells Benny that she was hoping that Benny could explain it. Gilly also reveals her theory about the statues, that they were powered by bright violet, a mythical living pigment that needs water and sunlight to be sustained. They better not let Anish Kapoor near it, though. That's too much power for even the owner of the blackest substance to hold. Might force Stuart Semple to make a living pigment of his own to rival it, though. Anyway, Gilly and Benny activate the statues and the protesters and armies start attacking the dig site, being overpowered by the statues, where some shrapnel takes off one of Gilly's legs. They recover in the medical tent, where Benny learns Gilly was a spy and stealing stuff for her government, but she was only doing so because she wanted to learn about the bright violet, and spying was the easiest way to get onto the dig site. The story ends with Benny apologizing about Gilly's leg, but Gilly simply moans that it'll take months to grow back. Never the Way opens with Benny waiting in a bar for Calico Nightstreet, a shady figure that's supposed to help Benny smuggle an 11-year-old princess named Emmy to her mother's allies on another world because of her homeworld not being safe for the royalty anymore. Nightstreet gives her boarding papers for a spaceship, but betrays her after getting payment. Blah blah, insert the Firefly, curse, your sudden but inevitable betrayal clip here. They start getting chased by a Pede assassin, a giant millipede creature made up of smaller millipedes, and Benny borrows a Plan B from the Doctor and starts legging it out of there. They get to the spaceport and get onto the ship, and Benny and Emmy get a few minutes to breathe and take stock of their lives. And we learn that Emmy comes from a dynarchy, a government run by two queens. But sometimes the queens don't get along and assassination plots happen. At the first cargo stop, the Pede returns and they escape thanks to Emmy being able to give suggestions to every computer with her royal override and teleports them away to a planet. They wander around the planet they landed on before Bernice is suddenly doubled over with laughter. Out in the distance, she can see the Sky Pyramid of Zarba, where Gilly found her centuries-old diary. Turns out that Benny, when using a faulty quantum booster to travel to Emmy's homeworld, was also inadvertently thrust millennia back in time. She had spent some time after Gilly gave it to her trying to figure out the logistics of the diary, but found nothing, and now she just stumbled into it. Honestly, that's about what I expect out of Bernice Summerfield at this point. She also realizes that they're about 2 weeks early for the fall of the Sky Pyramid, but Benny doesn't expect to be around to see it. Either they'll have escaped the planet, or the Pedes will have killed them by that point. Benny bluffs the Overseer to ensure safe passage to their original destination from Zarva, and they're locked up while the Overseer and Prince try to figure out what Benny and Emmy know. Benny has a nice heart-to-heart with Emmy since she also has a history with childhood trauma, her mother having been murdered by the Daleks, telling Emmy that she doesn't have to be brave and should instead be adventurous. Benny and Emmy start to brainstorm escape plans, and Benny starts trying to figure out how to rig a control module for the Bright Violet statues, but Emmy says that they don't need one. Bright Violet came from the Dynarchy, and Emmy herself is a control module. Not by ordering it, but by suggesting things and letting the pigment figure it out for itself. They drive the robots nuts and escape their cell as Benny tries to figure out how to get Emmy to her allies and then get herself back to the future. The Pedes show back up, taking a page from the Terrafel Arbiter's book of Continue Showing Up, only to be outfoxed by a child, and Benny defeats the Pedes and the Overseer and Crown Prince by using the Bright Violet to shake around the Sky Pyramid, possibly influencing its later destruction, and completes the time loop by leaving her diary from Zarva where Gilly found the other one. Well, not quite the same diary, which she had lost in the interim, but the important thing is that it looks like it, so Benny would have enough information to know to complete the loop. The story ends with Benny musing that of all her ideas about how the diary ended up where it ended up turned out to be false, and that the real message the diary was supposed to impart to her was that it was in her nature, as in the nature of life, to, find a way. Sorry, couldn't resist. We'll be right back with more of the show. And we're back, and... Wait a minute. This isn't my screwdriver. Benny is written brilliantly, though I expected that, considering that this wasn't any of those writers' first stories with her. She's exactly the way she should be, and I heard all of her dialogue in the voice of Lisa Bowerman. Benny is a fine companion, but she really shines when she gets to take the reins, and having her be the clever one was fantastic. I really have to get my hands on more of her solo material from Virgin Books. I especially love her interactions with both her colleagues at the dig site and Emmy. I mean, for one thing, I love a lot of Benny's stuff because anthropology and archaeology are one of my secret hobbies that I'm super passionate about, so I love reading about how Benny and her colleagues excavate the Sky Pyramid. I also really liked Gilly and how not human she was. One thing I love about Big Finish, and really the entire Doctor Who extended canon, is that we get a lot of non-human creatures that we'd never see on TV because of budgetary issues. And Gilly and her people with the voice boxes are a brilliant idea for a species. Gilly was extremely developed, and I liked how her entire motive for being a spy and stealing stuff was just a means for her and the fact that all her stolen stuff ended up trapped in the pyramid when it was destroyed wasn't really all that worrying for her because she got what she came for. It's nice to have archaeologists who are just in it to learn sometimes. I also like how all the other characters, Benny's colleagues, Calico Night Street, Emmy, the Overseer, and Crown Prince, they're all developed characters despite being one-offs. They're not going to have any bearing on any other story, but they were developed very well in the stories they were in. What I appreciate the most is that while they could have so easily made Emmy a spoiled princess that has to learn to be nicer, an archetype that lesser sci-fi has fallen into, Enterprise, they didn't. In fact, Emmy being a princess only factors into helping Benny escape, and yeah, she acts like a child, but she's 11, and written like an 11-year-old should be. Kudos to Bloom and Booth for that. Plus, we get the really unique concept of not being able to order the living pigments and computers around, but merely suggesting things. It's a very Doctor Who-esque story element, really shows how much of a handle the authors have on the universe, even though that this takes place in a different universe. There's a diverse array of characters in these stories, and they're really compelling right from the first page they appear on. The pacing on the two stories were fantastic. A problem that some short stories have is pacing problems. Sometimes a story goes on for too long and maybe should have been shorter. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's over far too quickly and it leaves the reader wishing it was a full novel. These two don't have that problem. They're exactly as long as they need to be and nothing feels rushed or unexplained. Sure, we know Jack about the Bright Violet in the first one, but that's resolved immediately by the second story. I don't know if the intention of that was that maybe Jonathan Bloom and Rupert Booth read Kate Ormond and Q's story and decided they wanted to finish it, or if it was Ormond and Q's idea to leave it open, but either way, I'm happy they did. Plus, I love a good time loop. I liked how the two stories interacted, but were entirely their own thing. It's why I did the two stories in one video. Just doing one is useless because you need the second story to get the full effect. But what's also great is that they do stand on their own in terms of story enjoyment. You don't necessarily have to have read Hue and Cry first, and both stories work on their own merits. And both stories have a great mix of comedy and straight action with daring escapes, but still a lot of the snark that one would expect to be coming out of Benny's mouth during tense situations. These stories were utterly brilliant. It was my first purely Bernice Summerfield book, and it was a delight. I highly recommend the entire anthology, and these two specifically. And you can bet your ass that we'll be coming back to this one day. If you're new to Bernice Summerfield, you should check out Love and War first to understand her character, but you don't necessarily have to know anything about David Warner's Unbound audios. They don't factor in at all, apart from small mentions, and none of them are in these specific stories. It's not a great intro to the Unbound universe, but it's a fantastic duo of stories. Could it have used more of David Warner's Unbound Doctor? I would have loved that, but I think the stories work better without him. Overall, if you're a fan of Bernice Summerfield, check this anthology out. You won't be disappointed. And that was Bernice Summerfield True Stories. Was it good? Of course it is. It's Bernice Summerfield. I've never seen, listened to, or read a Bernice Summerfield story that I didn't absolutely adore, and this is no exception. Add in the fact that it takes place in one of my favorite universes, and it's a match made in heaven. The characters, the pacing, everything is perfect. Big Finish, at least in my experience with the Doctor Who and Bernice Summerfield stuff I've listened to, always hits it out of the park, and this book is another home run. An optimistic note to start the year off on, I think. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button, and if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit that bell icon. And if you like this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. See you next time, and get ready for a very interesting 2018. We'll be right back with more of the show.
Oh, so weird.
Does it?
Just being in your sweater vest?
Well, it's because I got a pocket in there.
Yeah, but they don't know that. They don't know that. You just look like someone who put shit in your clothes. It's like in your bra.
Look at it.
You can just lift it up.
I know, but it's boring that way.